task is going to be to write and create the United Nations and write the UN Charter. This is going to be a little different from the normal debates because you are writing a charter. No one is obliged to follow the charter until it's drafted and you join it, which means you'll be adding text to it. And then from there, at the end of the committee, we will see who wants to join the United Nations as it's created. Every state is equal. There are states like the United States that's like, hey, we're rich and we weren't devastated by the war. You had tens of thousands of journalists and advocates showing up, trying to make the United Nations something that would work. Because in the past 30, 40 years, millions upon millions of people have been killed by war. Countries have been flattened and devastated, and it has been horrific. Latin America and the Americas escaped largely unscathed. Japan is still at war with all of you right now. Nazi Germany is still at war with all of you right now. Countries like Norway have recently been liberated, but destroyed. France is rubble. This is the thing you want to avoid, and you cannot do that exercising your own individual self-interest. You need to come together as nations. Give up sovereignty to an international body to ensure that you can save succeeding generations from the scourge of war.
All those in favor of opening the debate, please raise your finger. All opposed? Motion passes.
First of all, we think the most important issue we need to discuss is the right to self-determination. Without it, it could cause war between countries with high tensions, and the UN is created to prevent these wars.
I think almost all of us can agree that we support regionalism except China in mentioning, and I also think most countries have agreed in supporting self-determination, which USA looks forward to discussing more later. And USA thinks it's utmost important to mention the veto and making sure that we can balance powers among smaller countries and larger countries, which seem to be the biggest point that smaller countries are bringing up.
It is completely not logical to have this veto because first, the UN is built on the idea and the goal of international peace.
I support France having a veto because I believe that there should be someone on the European continent where there is not on the European continent, it's an island.
So not all countries in each continent have the same beliefs. For example, China doesn't exactly agree with Japan at the moment. So how would we decide if Japan will ever join the UN? How would we decide like who gets to veto things, and how will that mess up the veto powers with high tensions?
The General Assembly passes anything with a 3/4 majority vote, then the veto cannot be used.
What happens if the smaller countries grow bigger, they get more money, and they have more power? Do they get to have a veto too?
On this matter, I think that we can consider adding countries later on. For example, if countries grow stronger, we can consider that. And assuming that Africa does become fully decolonized eventually, perhaps an African nation should be added to the Security Council with a veto.
Argentina and other countries have brought upon arguments stating that they would not want Brazil or France to be in representation of their different countries.
All in favor of a 5-1 on the Big Five's plan on vetoes, please raise your placards. All opposed? This passes.
We would like for there to be a representative from our region to have veto power just because of the similarities in our nations.
I believe that collective security can be really helpful, especially in countries that, like my country, Guatemala, that is a developing country that might need help.
I feel like collective security is a very general term, and I would like to bring up that maybe the Musketeer Clause might not be that good of an idea in this solution.
For the matter of Brazil, I think they are really dominant in South America, and although they have done some things to other countries, I think they are powerful, and if we have Brazil on the veto system, it will help all of South America.
I would like to point out that China and both UK's point that the UK doesn't really consider themselves a part of Europe, and so it might be best to have France represent Europe.
A motion for recess would be smiled upon. China, please rise. That is in order. All in favor?
I told you, go Boris Johnson.
Be nice, don't make too much noise.
The U.S. believes that it is important for Brazil to also have a veto for equal representation, and we also think that Brazil and France can geographically both represent their areas.
A country from each continent should have a veto. I think that at least one country from each continent should have a spot in the Security Council.
We haven't really talked about any representation from the Middle East, as there's no really representation on the veto chair right now, and a lot of Middle Eastern countries go off of Islamic laws, and certain laws that could be passed if they if they go against Islamic laws, that isn't really fair to our country.
I think there should be a collective security program where humanitarian aid could branch off of that. And like France was saying, I agree that the big four should be the ones that most contribute.
I would like to know what kind of humanitarian aid and support, like what form it would be in.
The countries that have a permanent veto in the Security Council should be obliged or should have a kind of more moral obligation to give more aid if they are in the situation and in the financial position too.
It's pretty obvious that there were a number of different solutions to how we're going to prevent or override vetoes, but I would like to propose a solution that I believe will please both sides. So, first of all, we would stick with overriding it rather than preventing it, and it would be the same solution as earlier, relatively similar, where it's the Security Council that votes on whether it should be overridden. But with one caveat, the General Assembly will get to vote on it, and if they vote to override it, that vote will count for 3 votes versus compared to the 1 vote that the Big Four, each Big Four member has. So that is almost equivalent to the amount that the entire Big Four together has.
I will remind you that the General Assembly will probably be like 50 people at the beginning of this, and considering that that a lot of them will already be members of the Security Council, most of them will already have that 1 vote given. Many of them already have that 1 vote given to them, and the General Assembly having 3 votes is honestly, I think it's a pretty good deal.
As one of the members who's currently writing the veto article, I would just like to clarify, logistically how overriding a veto would work.
As a point of clarification for anyone, the Security Council, we haven't defined who yet, but the Security Council will also have additional members who are also member states in the General Assembly. So that won't just, when we're going back to the voting, the 3 or 4, it'll be even more representation of General Assembly in the Security Council as well.
Okay, I would just like to address one thing about the veto powers versus the Security Council. So the veto powers are more exclusive, so it's only a very few number of countries that have this power, but all of them must be on Security Council. And then we will clarify who gets to be on the Security Council, and to have more representation, we're going to start. We're going to have a rotating cycle.
Any nations who join the Security Council through the process, do they become permanent members, or through the or can they become permanent members?
This chapter does not exactly concern itself with the Security Council. It's more concerned with veto powers. You may write another chapter on the Security Council specifically.
Regions over time may change, and there may be conflict in between regions. The U.S. thinks it would be more impactful if we made the different rotation based on continent mainly.
All in favor of 7 unmoderated caucus. All opposed. Motion passes. You have 7 minutes.
Alexa.
Yeah. I think that. But draw
I think that it should be 2 representatives per continent.
All in favor and debate.
Nah.
Standing debate. All opposed. Motion passes.
Have you heard us discussing it?
I'm going to start off by finishing probably our first agenda topic, which is jurisdiction. I know we have some legislature written, so we'll go over that, we'll present that, we'll discuss that, maybe we'll vote on that, adding that to the charter. And with that, I will open up the floor for any points of motions.
Motion to reopen the debate.
That is in order. All in favor of opening the debate, please clap. All opposed, motion passes.
We've written a whole new chapter during the break last night, and we wrote it on the Security Council, which were like reviewed, as well as critiques for our voting procedure as well.
The Security Council is going to be the more refined part of the General Assembly, and it has 16 members, including the Secretary General, which could differ between how many countries join.
Any member of the United Nations can nominate any state besides themselves for the Security Council, and these members must be in the General Assembly, and they can, and like Ethiopia said, they cannot be one of the big four.
So basically, within the General Assembly, every state will have one vote. This is to ensure the United Nations to be as equal as possible, and any resolution needs to have a 2/3 majority vote to pass.
Articles that you've written so far be amenable to changing it to 3 votes?
We would definitely be amenable, but from talking with other resolution writers, it was made unclear to us that it would change from 4 to 3. So we'd definitely be amenable to that. We would just have to figure out how many members are on the Security Council.
I think that maybe we should have it so that international law should only be heard if the nation itself has failed to serve to rule in that situation.
UN should be able to get involved in with Germany, and the US also agrees that we should focus on international law, like the USSR has stated.
While I do agree the International Court of Justice would be a great idea, I just would like to bring up the idea of Germany. As we know, Germany isn't at this conference right now, but they have obviously committed war crimes. But I would be the first one to want to attack Germany in such a court and bring them justice. But the thing is, since Germany isn't in the United Nations, would we be liable to sue them, or to pursue them, or would they even recognize us as a threat?
We believe that this compromise the UK has put up is good. As a reminder, this isn't, UN peacekeepers, for example, to prevent war, to prevent civil conflicts. It's something that does not require this 9/10 oral request.
Because I do believe, given that this is an international problem, if even more than a half of the countries are voting on getting the UN to intervene, then it's already showing how prominent of a problem this is for other countries and how it's impacting them.
And also a key part of this body is that all countries should be included, because unlike the General Assembly or the Security Council, it's not just 15 people or 20 people, and it's not just a whole General Assembly discussing various topics. It's very specific, and all countries can share their opinions.
All in favor, vote 430 Moderating Caucus on selecting the countries and judges. All opposed, this motion clearly passes.
So I think, as we agreed on in the last moderated caucus, we definitely don't want to reserve any justice seats based on region, because unlike the Security Council, justices are meant to be bipartisan and not serve any interest of their states.
Honduras agrees with France on the idea that it's not based on it's not based on region, but it's based on the quality of the person.
I do think that if we give special priority to certain religions or even ideological thinking, like the USSR was saying, then it would create priority over certain countries over others, which would not go along with the foundation of the UN.
It would be a terrible tragedy for the work of the UN and the work to create an allied cause is to dissolve over petty issues such as the membership of the international courts.
Motion for 530 on the colonization and self-determination of countries that have been colonized by Axis powers.
The chair would smile upon this motion. Please raise your placards. All opposed? This motion passes.
The USA believes all Axis territories should be decolonized, and the USA also believes that as long also in agreement with other countries, that if a country is dealing with a certain amount of instability or violating human rights, that an administrator representing the USA does have the right to intervene.
As opposed to what you might think, the UK is not going to go on a rampage on why decolonization is bad. We are in full support of decolonization of Axis territory colonies, and we are sadly not supporting the decolonization of non-Axis territories, but we would like to do efforts such as making individual deals with some of our colonies, as well as giving the UN power to mediate discussions between colonizers and colonies.
And as a Commonwealth of the United States ourselves, we believe that self-determination is really important to help lower tensions between colonies and their colonizers.
And we are very angered by France in the United Kingdom because of their hypocrisy. They are calling for the Axis powers to be decolonized. Well, massive countries, part of the Big Four, Big Five, whatever, don't want to decolonize their own provinces and colonies.
I would like to just talk about something brought up earlier called the Ordinance Council, which is a organ of the UN which will facilitate self-determination and decolonization. And I think that this discussion should be mainly for this body only, and we should more so focus on getting that body down on paper, so that way we can have more discussion if the UN is ever formed.
The UK cannot and will not support a clause or a chapter or anything that says that decolonization, like the direct decolonization or the total decolonization of all non-Axis territories is required.
Though the topic of colonization does not necessarily affect me as directly as it may some of you, because I know how to colonize directly, but I am concerned about our allies, such as Great Britain and USA, because most countries who decolonize their colonies, the colonies are completely left with an unstable government that typically fails.
While we strongly support the principle of decolonization and self-determination, it is our hope that within 20 years or so, we can see all of the French and British and, let's just forget, American empires fully decolonized. However, we also strongly believe in domestic jurisdiction, domestic control, and that means that we can't force our colonies out.
We do think that the UN should play a major role in helping kind of negotiate the terms of decolonization, helping a new government form. We do also think that if a colony wants to become independent, there should be a referendum within the citizens of the colony. UN's main job should be to mediate and help give them a more stable government. So like going back to Republic of China's point, they're not by themselves and they don't know how to create a stable government and have stable leaders.
Like, what if a colony wants to become its own independent country, but its colonizer is not willing to comply?
So our plan is to not only allow mediators, to allow the UN to be a mediator for the colonizing the colonies and the colonizers, to help further do discussions of self-determination and autonomy. We'd also like to propose the potential that if they consent to it, to issue an administrator, a temporary administrator, to help them get on the right track.
Initially, after World War I, it was applied to the people that lost that war. So the Ottoman Empire, they took an X-Acto knife and carved it up. And thus we have Iraq. When Woodrow Wilson started talking about self-determination, a lot of people said we're entitled to that too. So with decolonization, if you're going to repeat what you did in World War I, which is say if you lost the war, you lose your colonies, or expand it. If you expand it, then the major sticking point is who it applies to. Because there is a concern that you can have infinite regression. If you say Rwanda gets self-determination,
yeah,
that's wonderful. But then you have Hutus in Rwanda saying we want self-determination. And then you have groups within groups saying we want self-determination. And so that's how it can turn into a bit of a morass. There is the question of who and how you manage it. Because if you just say you're free now, maybe that's not the best option.
United Nations should provide resources for colonies that are becoming independent.
The USA does think it's really important in our UN Charter to define self-determination, as it's going to be a key point of helping to deter conflict, especially between later decolonized colonies that currently exist, and helping secure peace. Thank you.
I believe that self-determination is more about the right to choose what a colony or state wants to do rather than just giving them full independence. I think that independence is a choice, but if they do choose to be independent, either the UN or another larger party or country should help give them support in order to get back on their feet.
So the UK is against decolonization of non-access territory colonies, but is willing to compromise with specific deals with their colonies, as well as mediating for non-access, allowing the UN to mediate for non-access territory colonies.
Well, we do understand that there are reasons for colonies not wanting to become independent, and of course there are reasons for colonizers to not give up their colonies. But we do strongly believe that in any circumstance, it is a fundamental right for territories to be able to self-determine.
As France, Syria is obviously one of our colonies, and we would, if the Ordinance Council was established, we would be willing to have discussions with Syria, facilitated by the Ordinance Council, about a possible decolonization.
I do think that the Ordinance Council should be written in legislation as soon as possible because I think it is really essential to the United Nations.
I believe that the UN should be there to only moderate and ensure as little violence as possible rather than influencing any decisions.
It's important to make sure that our Ordinance Council is for having a facilitator position versus mandating that what certain colonies should do or what certain colonizers should do with their colonies.
As the museum's closed, there's not the alarm. Point the chair's mom, a motion to reopen debate.
Motion to open debate.
All those in favor of opening the debate, please raise your finger. All opposed? Motion passes.
In order to join the Security Council, the nations need a 3/4 majority of the General Assembly. If all 11 states do not receive the 3/4 majority, their spot will default to the previous state filling the region's positions. There will be 12 rotating representatives in total, but the amount for each region may change. The General Assembly will draft new regions and different amounts of representatives.
Be approved into the United Nations. A 2/3 majority in the General Assembly is required, along with a simple majority in the Security Council. Following this, the applicant shall become a member state.
Starting with the grammatical mistakes, the U.S. would definitely look forward to changing certain ands or we's and the way we have formatted some of our wording.
Many of the clauses require that all the members are attending in order for a vote to be conducted. But what if a country continues to not attend? Should they be removed from position?
All in favor of attendant, I'm already caucus. Please raise your hand. All opposed?
Okay, everybody, we're gonna have a very So me, Ethiopia, you, and America.
Yeah, I think we all agree on friendly. First of all, we need to talk about an organ removal process from the UN, and we also need to clarify what to do if certain members don't attend on purpose. I think that's another big thing.
Any grammatical changes we'll just do. Any actual content changes like this will be in suggestions. They are body represent folks of the national security. That's unnecessary.
I'm sorry to read some.
All in favor of United Kingdom presenting his unfriendly amendment, please raise your placard. All opposed? Motion passes.
If we say, we must have this, and this, if the U.S. wrote every single law in their code or their constitution, everything would be so stringent that there would be no way for anything to ever be accomplished.
The UK is willing to compromise and come up with a solution where when the regions and how many representatives they have are redecided or reconsidered every 10 years, we will also reconsider the number of vetoes that should be.
All in favor of voting on the friendly amendment, please raise your placard. All opposed? Motion passes. All in favor of doing these amendments, it would change the vetoes from 10 to 7, and it would add a clause that says that the vetoes will be reevaluated every 10 years. Please raise your placard. All in favor? All opposed? This motion clearly passes. afternoon, everyone. So this weekend, we had a historical committee, which I've never done before. The year was 1945, and our task was to create the outline for the United Nations. So we were aiming for an organization that would promote world peace, sort of harmony, a place where people could collaborate and look out for human rights violations, look out for advancement in technology, all that international sort of working together. And the committee was amazing. It was one of the best committees I've ever chaired by far, simply because every delegate spoke so much. It was such a collaborative process. There was not one person on my committee who did not speak a lot. There was not one person in the unmods, the unmoderated caucuses, who was left out of the discussion. Everyone was able to contribute. Everyone was able to discuss. Everyone's placards were going up the entire time. So it was super impressive. So now I'll have Noelle, and she was from France.
Well, first off, I want to thank Lulu for Lulu. I want to thank you for helping me with my speech, as I did with my voice earlier. And she really helped get my notes down and everything. But I guess we'll start. So if any of you have met me personally, I'm sure none of you will think I'm diplomatic. Like, energetic, sure, maybe even funny, but diplomacy was never my strong suit. So when Katerina approached me to ask me to write about this topic, I was really confused. I thought my speech would be something about speaking up or maybe standing out, anything to remotely do with my personality. But instead, I got like such a weird prompt that I never would have considered for myself. So why was I chosen for this topic? I guess I should start with my experience with debate. Ever since I was really young, I always had really strong opinions. I would fight with my mom a lot about those strong opinions. But my behavior was usually rewarded, especially from the tournament debates that I participated in throughout all my elementary school years. So when I got to LCM, it was my first introduction to real diplomacy. And I was shocked at what I was seeing. Delegates were working with each other, collaborating on projects, and suddenly it wasn't a he said, she said kind of situation. And I didn't really understand what was going on. So in like my first year of LCM, I basically didn't talk at all. And like I remember seeing these delegates that would stand up during conferences and they would speak so eloquently and twist their words into something that the whole committee could agree on. And I really admired them. And I felt so embarrassed that I couldn't do the same. But over the years, while I was eluding speeches and trying to make sure the chair didn't call on me, I spent my time observing and watching. And before this conference ends, I would like to impart some of the things I've learned from my, 3 years now of debating in LCM. So if any of you are in the UN committee, I'm sure you've seen my super big stack of notes. I really love to pass notes to other delegates, but mainly just like to get people to open up to you. Like even sending a simple note to maybe someone who hasn't talked yet, asking like how they view the debate. It's a great way to open up exchange and discussion on a topic. And I will credit my younger self with one thing. Observation is key to diplomacy. Getting a general read on the room and looking at who maybe some of the key players within a debate is a great way to figure out and plan your interests and how you're going to work with these other delegates. But that still doesn't answer the question, why was I picked for this topic? And while preparing and writing for the speech, I was still genuinely confused, and I hadn't come up with a proper ending yet. But then it all kind of came to me. I was chosen for this to talk about diplomacy because I was the least equipped to talk about it. I still have so much to learn about this topic, and staying curious is one of the most important factors to diplomacy. Because you need to observe, and you need to know that you still have so much more to learn about the debate from other delegates, and that other people can offer you opportunities that wouldn't come otherwise. So observation Observation, openness, and curiosity. That is diplomacy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, delegates, policy directors, and chairs. First of all, I would like to mention the topic that I'm discussing, which is leadership. And given this is my first year in LCM, I have had past leadership opportunities. I participated in school, whether it's student council or participating as an ambassador on my admissions board. I've always been super passionate about whether it's speaking out as a leader or helping to work with other leaders to create certain plans. But when I started LCM, it definitely was something that I was a bit nervous about, and it was something I would always be really quiet in committees at first, especially because I always was super intimidated, as Noelle was saying, about all these other delegates who were speaking so eloquently on their topics. And I realized over time that a really important thing about being a leader is knowing when to be the biggest voice in the discussion, but also when to step down and let other people take the lead. And I think I'm still learning more about these leadership skills as I progress, even in the conference I'm in currently. But I think that has been one of the biggest lessons I've learned so far. And an example of this is a couple conferences ago, I was a participant in a conference about disarmament on nuclear security. And during this, most of the small countries weren't being as listened to by the larger countries. And I was representing USA, so I thought a big job as a leader was helping to bring them together. And I ended up helping the smaller countries in speaking out and sharing their voices with the larger countries. And in the end, this actually created a large impact where a lot of the smaller countries had really important things to say that ended up being included in the resolution. And I think this just shows that a big part of being a leader is taking the initiative and really helping bring people together. As in debate, it's really about teamwork. Even though you're representing your country, you're really trying to unite all your countries or members together. And I think that's definitely an important lesson I've learned. And a couple other lessons I've learned about debate is, one, having courage, whether it's speaking up, giving a motion, or even whether it's helping encourage other people to speak up. I think that's such an important skill that I'm still continuing to learn more about today. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is communication. And I think during this conference especially, I've learned that whatever country you're representing, it's really important that you can help represent what you're trying to say in a way to help influence others and even encourage others to speak up as well. And I think throughout my LCM journey, I've really appreciated learning from other people and other leaders and encouraging them to bring out their leadership skills so we can all work together. And I even look forward to the rest of my LCM journey. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. It's such an honor to speak in front of all of you today, all the delegates and the staff, all the LCM staff that has made this debate possible, with a special shout out to our Chair Josie and our Policy Director John. I'd also like to recognize my roommate Rohan and all the other delegates who helped me cram for the speech last night. Well, I would like to start off by saying that this debate was a blast. From the heated, unmoderated caucuses to the passionate note passing, as as Noelle mentioned, and also the crazy conversations we had during lunch that I know I could never have in any other place. All this to say, I had a great time this last weekend. Before I move on, raise your hand if this is your first year doing LCM. Okay, so a significant amount of you. I'm sure that some of you might have been slightly intimidated coming into this debate. I know even as someone who's done several, I was a little intimidated myself. And I remember my first debate, I had no idea what to expect. I was stepping into a new world and I was unfamiliar with it. I didn't know writing resolutions, position papers, or even parliamentary procedure. So I remember feeling completely lost. And my first conference was about 2 years ago at this point, and it was on Zoom. And I remember immediately one delegate in particular stood out to me. This delegate was not afraid to speak their mind, was confident in their speeches, was always in control of unmoderated caucuses, was always aware of all the other delegates' positions. The perfect delegate that I wanted to be. Sorry, my phone just turned off. Okay, but sadly, or luckily, during this debate, because of the topic, I got to align myself with this delegate, and I got to learn by example how to most effectively get my voice heard in the debate. Sadly, I never got to thank this delegate, for helping me without even realizing it, but he has had such a lasting impact on me by being the representative that I want to be for others. So my speech, the prompt that I was given for this speech is motivation. And you might be wondering how this all ties into motivation. Well, motivation is kind of a tricky subject. It can be the people around you, it can be the rewards that you might receive, like the speech. It can be something deep within you that you just always had from day one. But for me, as I continue to grow as a delegate and strive, or the motivation, one of my biggest motivations to continue to strive to be like that delegate is to be able to one day offer that same guidance to some of the new delegates out there, and hopefully have the same lasting impact that they had on me. So thank you all for the honor that I've had to speak in front of all of you. If nothing else from this speech, I hope you all take some time to think about how you as delegates influence the delegates around you. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday, I suppose. We're about to be heading back very shortly. I hope that all of us get a good rest tonight after pretty much not resting, I suppose, since Thursday. Anyway, I was asked to talk about history. That was my prompt. And the first question among that was, what is one of the biggest things in history? And I was trying to think, well, what was the biggest thing? One of my favorite answers has always been the invention of writing, because that just changed single-handedly the entire path of civilization. Of course, I can consider major technological discoveries, the invention of the vaccine in 1799, which single-handedly may have doubled the human lifespan, or the creation of, I was also tempted to say the creation of the UN, which was the conference that I was in for this past weekend. But the end answer that I came up with is that I've got nothing, and that there is really no true way to answer the most important thing, simply because there has just been so much that has happened over a billion years of everybody just improvising what to do next. So the thing that I did find out, though, is that the best stories from history are the ones that are the easiest to remember and the most fun to tell. I told quite a few of them coming up here on the bus, and I'll give you all one now. At my conference, it's a model UN, so everybody says, I am this country. But we also remember that at that debate, there were individual people representing their countries. And that person representing the Soviet Union, my country, was Vyacheslav Molotov. Now, Molotov was the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, the Foreign Secretary for the Soviet Union, and he is most well known for the term the Molotov cocktail. This term was invented during when Russia decided around 1938 to invade the country of Finland. Now, while Russia is well known for fighting in the winter, the only people better at it than the Russians are the Finns. So the Finns, they're just skiing around everywhere. They're just ambushing them in every corner. They're leading Russian people onto frozen lakes, breaking it and letting them freeze to death in the water. It was both brutal and hilarious. And while the Russians did end up winning, it was pretty much one of the biggest disasters for their reputation worldwide that they ever had to face, simply because of how many people they lost. And that story is pretty fun, and this is where Molotov comes in, because he frequently dropped down these bread baskets. I can't remember whether they were actually baskets of bread or something a bit more malicious, but he dropped down bread baskets, presumably to sway people to the other side. However, the Finns decided to combat that by creating the Molotov cocktail. They call it a cocktail because they believed that it would go well with the bread. And that was the punchline. And that story, I must have learned that in, 4th or 5th grade? But I have always enjoyed telling it, simply because it is this strange mix of just the most crazy things that have happened over, billions of years. And, again, as I was saying a minute ago, I just realized I didn't exactly plan an ending for this speech. They're the stories that are the easiest to remember, the most fun to tell. And there's definitely quite a few more of them, but I think that this is around when my speech should end. So the last question was, why is history important? And the answer is, when we look back at the past, you can understand even a smidge of what's happening tomorrow. And if you don't know what's happening tomorrow, you can never be prepared, you can never plan. And I suppose that in the end is the importance, because in the end, history isn't just the big players. It's every little decision that's ever been made. And I think that is why it is, in fact, so important. So thank you and have a nice day.